Hi, everybody, and welcome to CMES Book Talks. I am delighted to see all of you and all of you who registered. We are doing something today that is very dear to our heart, which is a discussion about Arabic sociolinguistics. We hope that you join us to other book talks, but again, today we wanted to celebrate the Arabic language, its variations, the theorizing of its variation in a discussion of a very important book that was recently published. The person who will introduce this book is our very own Zainab Hermes, who earned her PhD in linguistics from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign in 2018. Her dissertation examined the articulation of certain speech sounds in Qahirian Arabic. She's interested in experimental linguistics. She has conducted research on various dialects of Arabic, including her native Qahirian Arabic, as well as Lebanese, Jordanian, and Saudi Arabic. She is involved in several research projects at the University of Chicago dedicated to dialects of Arabic. I won't read to you her publications, but I will also note her role in the University of Chicago as a professor of Arabic language in MSA and in the colloquial. So Zainab will introduce our speakers. If you're an Arabic speaker, I also want to invite you to the Nadwa, to the Arabic circle she runs. And Zainab, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Orit, and thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to this very special talk about this very important book, Arabic Sociolinguistics. And we are very honored to have with us Dr. Enam Al-Wer and Dr. Horesh. And they are two of the four authors of this book, and they will present to us the topics in this book. So Dr. Enam Al-Wer is professor of linguistics at the Department of Language and Linguistics at the University of Essex. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of Jordan, and her master's in linguistics was from the University of Manchester, and it was a study on the syntax of negation in Jordanian Arabic. Her PhD at the University of Essex was on phonological variation in the speech of women. In addition to the University of Essex, she has taught at Philadelphia University, Cambridge University, and Birkbeck College. She is co-author of a number of books, including A Grammar of Jordanian Arabic, and she's co-editor of 3 books, including the Routledge Handbook of Arabic Social Linguistics, and she's also an author of the book series Studies on Arabic Linguistics. And Dr. Horesh is senior lecturer in linguistics in the Arabic language. Uri holds a PhD in social linguistics from the University of Essex as well. Their research focuses on language variation and change, mostly in the Levantine dialects of Arabic, and on language contact in the Eastern Mediterranean, predominantly between Palestinian Arabic and modern Hebrew. Dr. Horesh has taught courses in linguistics, social linguistics, Semitic linguistics, translation, and on Arabic and Hebrew at educational institutions in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Palestine. And we're very excited to discuss this important book, Arabic Social Linguistics. It was written by 4 leading experts. This book provides a comprehensive overview of social linguistic variation and linguistic change in Arabic. It introduces sociolinguistic theory, methods, and data. Topics covered include social linguistic methodology, social variables, language change, spatial variation, and contact and diffusion. The topics cover a wide array of Arabic-speaking communities in the Middle East and in North Africa, as well as other parts of the world where Arabic is or was spoken. So the book thus provides a rich resource for individual dialects, as well as a comparative view of variation in Arabic. And it's an essential resource for students studying Arabic and its social context, as well as anyone wishing to expand their knowledge of variation in Arabic. So without further ado, we look forward to learning more about this work and about the topics covered in it. And I leave the floor to Dr. Enam and Dr. Uri. And as Orit mentioned, the format we will start with a presentation by the authors, our guests today, and then we'll have a short discussion, and then there will be an opportunity for Q&A from our audiences. So when it's time for the Q&A, you can feel free to raise your virtual hand and say your question. directly to our guests, or you also feel free to write your question in the chat and it will be asked for you, inshallah. So without further ado, تفضلوا Dr. Enam and Dr. Uri.
Thank you so much. I think we'll start with Uri.
Yes, thank you. I just want to mention that one of our two co-authors, Dr. Bruno Errand, is also here with us in the audience. Yes, we shall begin. And thank you for everyone who's come, and thank you to Orit and Tom and Zainab for inviting us. It was very kind and generous of you. So we'll go. Here we are.
Uri, you might want to, yeah, that's right.
I know. Okay, so here we go, Arabic sociolinguistics. And this donkey doesn't speak Arabic as far as we know, but who knows what'll happen in the future. So here we go. When we talk about Arabic sociolinguistics, it's important for us to explain what we mean, first of all, by Arabic, right? Because there are some misunderstandings or conflicting views. So for us, Arabic is a range of linguistic systems. In other words, varieties, one can call them dialects, that on the one hand share lexical and structural characteristics, but on the other hand also differ in many other lexical and structural characteristics. And each of these systems, that is, each of these dialects, each of these varieties is governed, like any other natural language, by syntactic, morphological, phonological rules, and all of these comprise its grammar. And I'm saying this especially for the non-linguists in the audience. There is this tendency to say standard Arabic is grammatical and everything else does not have a grammar, anything goes. That is absolutely untrue. Some of these grammars have in fact been researched, described, and codified, such as the dialect of Cairo, and Manfred Voidig, Professor Voidig is here with us. Jordanian Arabic, which is the book that Bruno Errand and Enam Al-Wer have recently completed writing. Damascus Arabic, an old favorite from Georgetown University Press, and so on and so forth. Now, the spoken varieties of Arabic, as are the spoken varieties of any other language, are acquired naturally. We acquire them in childhood, and the written variety, what is so-called standard Arabic, classical Arabic, call it what you may, is no one's native language. It does not have native speakers, and it's learned later in life through formal education. So it is within this conceptualization that we can justify calling Arabic one of the world's largest living languages, right? Both because of the number of people who speak it and because of the wide geographical distribution. So it's not a coincidence that Arabic is one of 6 official languages of the United Nations, for instance. Another concept that's very basic to the book and to our research in general is sociolinguistics. And the focus of sociolinguistic research, the kind of sociolinguistic research we're interested in, is variation and change in natural language. It's also a technical term that's used by sociolinguists, is the vernacular. And because of this, the kind of research they were interested in Arabic sociolinguistics focuses on these spoken varieties, on the diversity within these spoken varieties, and the socio part of sociolinguistics is the social correlates. And we'll illustrate more of that when we get to the chapters of the book, where you can see what these social correlates might be. So this diversity, which is linguistic in nature, is apparent throughout all Arabic varieties, but they're also related to the diversity in Arab societies themselves, both from a historical perspective and a synchronic perspective, that is what is happening now. And it's important as well to keep in mind that some of this diversity has to do with other languages spoken by the same societies or by neighboring societies, what we later will call language contact. What is really the first work in Arabic sociolinguistics proper is a book by Clive Holes, where he investigated the Arabic dialect or variation in Arabic dialects in Bahrain. And what's important about this work and the work in general that we cite and that we ourselves conduct research in is that it is based on empirics. It is all based on how people actually speak. And in this book, Holes analyzed variation and change in the Bahraini vernaculars as a case of interaction between various locally based native varieties. In his case, the focus was between the main dichotomy, although it's not really a dichotomy, is between the Arab and the Baharna, the Sunnis and the Shiites of Bahrain. And in this book as well, Holes separated the macro level aspect of variation, standard versus vernacular. That is less of interest to sociolinguists, but rather what's interesting more is the domain of variation within the vernacular. Okay, and that's the approach we take as well. We'll say a few words about dialectology because it might seem, again, to the lay the lay educated listener that, okay, you're talking about dialects, it's dialectology. Dialectology is actually, again, it's a technical term for a subfield of linguistics that has some overlap with sociolinguistics, but they are not one and the same. Dialectological research does play a central role. Right, the dialectology, traditional dialectology, is a descriptive art, I could say, or science. It's an art and a science, and it provides us with some of the fundamental background that we need to embark on sociolinguistic research. So that is to say, if we want to compare the speech of Shi'i and Sunni speakers in Bahrain, it's important to first have kind of a mapping of how each of these groups speaks before we can delve into what is beyond description and highlight what we observe in the various varieties of language to a more general theory of language. And another very important subfield of linguistics that that feeds into sociolinguistics is historical linguistics, and that's because sociolinguistics is variation, which is how people speak differently now, and change, namely how language evolves over time, and historical linguistics, traditional historical linguistics, typically looks at a very broad kind of time depth, whereas in sociolinguistics, the changes that we're trying to observe as they occur are relatively more recent. But we do have to, and we do this in the book as well, we rely upon descriptions of Arabic dating back to medieval times. Some of the medieval grammarians, the name Sibawayhi may ring a bell for some of you, but also more contemporary analyses of ancient inscriptions and other corpora of Arabic, both written and spoken. And what we will do next is start talking about the summary of the book's chapters. I'll talk about the first one, and then we'll move on to Enam. So the first chapter, the first chapter of the book deals with methodology, but in a very broad sense, meaning we lay out some of the more general methodological principles of sociolinguistic research, and these can be applicable to any language, right? We're interested in Arabic, but you know, both Enam and I and many of our colleagues, when we studied sociolinguistics, we studied general sociolinguistics, general linguistics. and we are applying what we know to Arabic. And just like the linguistic components and the social aspects of sociolinguistic theory, we also have some very clear-cut and very, how would I put it, almost altruistic, without sounding too bombastic, ethical considerations, and we talk about that at length in the book as well. And then we move on to talk about methodological aspects of research that is specific to Arabic-speaking communities. We try to steer away from all kinds of stereotypes about the Middle East and women and men in the Middle East and all kinds of things like that that you hear left and right. We do believe that there are peculiarities to working on Arabic-speaking communities, just as there are peculiarities in speaking of in researching any other specific community, and just like the data themselves that we analyze, which are real empirical data reflecting how people speak, the commentary that we make on methodology and ethics is also derived from our own experience in the field and our own struggles with obtaining the kind of data that we want. And we do focus on two specific analytical frameworks. One is ethnography, which is both a method and almost a philosophy, I would say. And we also talk about basic principles of quantitative analysis. Not everything that we do in sociolinguistics has to have a statistical component to it, but without quantitative analysis, without some kinds of statistics, it is hard to convey the reliability of our analyses. Now, the first social variable that we talk about is age, right? Because if you think about any community that you know, think of 3-4 generations, great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, kids, you'll notice that almost invariably in any language, there are going to be differences. Some of these differences are due to a phenomenon we call age grading. We're not going to talk about this now, but some of these phenomena, some of these features that change over time are actually reflected by differentiation across generations. And the reason that we included age as a social factor in the methodology chapter is because it is at the same time both a social variable and an analytical tool, right? Just in a nutshell, what we hypothesize is that if we talk to someone aged 70 and another person aged 40 and 20 and let's say 8 years old, today, there is something about the speech of each generation that reflects the language that they had acquired when they were at the age of that young child that we also interviewed today, okay? So by folding in age into the methodology chapter, we kill two birds in one stone, right? We do talk about the social aspects, the social ramifications of age as a factor in language variation, but we also account for change in a way that we couldn't have done in most cases without stratifying our speakers based on age. Enam, it's all yours, starting with gender.
Thank you very much, Uri. Okay, this is our chapter 3, gender. This is one of the trickiest chapters really to write, but what we try to do from the start is dispel some of the myths. I mean, this has been done in Arabic, in fact, back in the 80s by Muhammad Hassan Ibrahim. The point about Arabic, how we can fit data from Arabic within the generalizations that were that prevailed in sociolinguistics. So we start with that. We start with a commentary on these erroneous conclusions about Arabic data. We also try to shy away from and explain why we mustn't stop at describing the social meaning of linguistic variables with such terms as tough and soft. We explain in details and go through empirical that shows that the real story lies somewhere else. So we try to understand the socio-historical factors that contributed to this particular stereotype, for instance, that certain sounds are perceived as tough or soft or otherwise. Uri? The chapter after that, chapter 4, is education. We felt that it was important to include education in a separate chapter because almost all studies on Arabic variation used education in fact, instead of socioeconomic, instead of stratification, to divide the speakers, to select speakers as well as to interpret the data. So we wanted to focus on the exact meaning of education in Arabic, and we go through such points as education as a proxy variable. In fact, most social variables turn out to be proxy variables, but in particular, education in Arabic is connected with the involvement of standard Arabic in variation and change. And I'll say it straight out that we do not think that standard Arabic is part of the story, really. It is there, it has a role to play in Arab societies, but insofar as sociolinguistic variation and change is involved, it's not really involved. And we explain why education sometimes did render some interpretations that made sense, but will no longer do that as soon as we have a situation where speakers don't have to travel to the city in order to get their education. And we also, in this chapter, go through some more recent research that pointed out that type of education is important. In fact, Nilüfer Haeri did touch upon that back in the 1980s in talking about private education versus state education. But we elaborate more on that, building on what Uri has found in his PhD thesis about type of education in terms of what languages are being used in this education, in various educational institutions. And we also updated this information to include this new type of schooling. We looked at case studies in 3 places, in Palestine, Jordan, and Morocco, and looked at the new type of education where international schools are involved. And we explained the importance of understanding exactly the product of this type of education, because we see that it is causing sometimes an upheaval and important reconfiguration of social classes, really, in several communities. Uri? And the chapter after that talks about social stratification. And what we try to do here is to look at the most recent work in variationist studies, really, in various Arabic communities. And the fact that several scholars have tried various ways of accounting for social stratification. So we present, in addition to the classical works, for instance, Nilüfer Haeri and Clive Halls and others, we also look at newer ways of classification of social stratification. So we looked at a social network. There aren't that many studies in Arabic that used social network, but there is an important study from the 1980s when social network was very famous. However, there are newer studies that looked at social networks also as proxy variables. So it mediated through contact, really intensity of contact. So we present that, and we also presented a study that used regionality that looked promising really as a way of social stratification, and that is the study of Al-Ghamdi in Mecca, which used Chambers' ideas and tried to see whether such a classification can work. We also touched upon life mode as a way of social stratification, and there is a very important study of the community of Damascus that used a life mode, and we also touch obviously on communities of practice. Unfortunately, there aren't very many studies that applied community of practice. In particular, we relied on Atika Hashimi's work to explain that part. Uri? Okay, this is a very important chapter, we think, because religion and ethnicity have always featured in a sense in dialectology as well as in early works in sociolinguistics. In particular, the works that were done by Clive Halls in particular, he talked about sect and religion, but in fact before that, back in the 1960s, we have some classic studies that talked about the importance of religious affiliation, and obviously these terms that are used, Muslims speak in a particular way, Christian, Ajam, or Druze, or Bahana. So we try to go beyond that, obviously, to explain the socio-historical circumstances that gave rise to stratification along these lines. There are also recent works that looked at the emergence of religion as a social factor. And we think this is very important, especially seeing as religion has increasingly occupied an important role in the development of several Arabic-speaking communities, and in particular, the importance of this particular case, how religion emerges as a sociolinguistic factor, is a window, can give us information about all of those cases that were talked about in the 1960s, how this situation might have come about in the first place. And this part of the book culminates with a chapter on language change. For almost obvious reasons, there's quite a bit of theory in this chapter. For the book as a whole, really, we tried to make it a book in sociolinguistics of Arabic. What I mean by that is that we are hoping that the student of Arabic sociolinguistics in particular will be able to learn sociolinguistics generally speaking, as well as sociolinguistics of Arabic. So in this chapter, we go through the main theories of how language changes and the relationship of that to age differences and the various ways in which we can investigate language change. Okay. The final two chapters are dedicated to contact to space, really. So we begin by looking at geographical differentiation, and we revived some of the old atlases. In fact, Arabic dialectology is as old as any dialectology around the world. It goes back to the 19th century, and there are very important linguistic atlases that are sometimes not easily accessible to the student of sociolinguistics of Arabic because of language. I mean, some of the one of the earliest ones was written in French, and several students do not have access to that. So we focused on the early atlases and ways of displaying the information, the linguistic data. So the very first linguistic atlas is Bergstrasse from 1915. So we go through methods of presentation, the older methods of presentation, but we also present the newer atlases, and we have one of the pioneers of the newer atlases, Manfred Voidig, here with us in the audience. We looked also at linguistic cartography as used by Rudolf de Jong in his 2 books on Sinai. In this chapter also, Uri, can you move to the next? In this chapter, we also look at what we call here barriers and carriers of linguistic features. There are some very important, there's some very important research from Egypt in particular by Manfred Voidig and others from around the Arab world. And we look at notions such as focal and relic areas, as well as Arabic-based creoles in Africa in particular. Uri? And the final chapter deals with contact and diffusion and the formation of new dialects. We cover things like borrowing and substratal effect, in particular, substratal effect of Aramaic on Arabic in the Levant and Mesopotamia. We also look at the substratal influence of Amazigh on the Arabic varieties of North Africa. In this chapter, we also try to look at what we usually call Sprachbund or linguistic areas in linguistics, generally speaking. In Arabic, we preferred to use the term areal groupings because it wasn't really looking at the data. It wasn't very clear that we can call these Sprachbund. In any case, we call them areal groupings. So we look at Central Asian Arabic dialects and their non-Semitic neighboring languages that have affected them and show quite clear effect of neighborhood effect. So surviving the neighborhood effect of several languages being in contact with Arabic within the same area. In this chapter 2, we looked at types and models of diffusion. We looked at the major diffusion models, for instance, that Peter Truggill has talked about and Jack Chambers. And we look at things such as koinization, the development of koines and regional koinization in reference again to empirical data that is available from Arabic. And finally, we looked at the very important and fascinating cases of transitional zones. This is a view from the Nile Delta and the work of Manfred Voidig and Peter Beinstedt. So we looked at transitional zones around the 2 tributaries, Damietta and Rosetta, and explain also the emergence of interdialectal forms. And I think that's it. Thank you very much. And that is the content of our book.
Thank you very much for this very thorough and interesting summary, really, of the book, and it gives us all the desire to read more about this. As I said, I have a few questions for you, and then we'll open it up to all the participants here to ask the questions that they have. But my first general question to you is, as both of you specialists in social linguistics, Arabic social linguistics, which aspect of Arabic social linguistics in particular do you think contributes the most to social linguistics as a field? In other words, which aspect of social linguistics generally is better exemplified or better studied through Arabic social linguistics specifically? I mean, I'm thinking maybe, do you think diglossia perhaps, or code switching?
Oh.
Do you think Arabic is like the...
You see, both of us are giggling.
Right. Okay. I mean, our book doesn't begin with that. I know people are used to reading Arabic is a diglossic language at the beginning of almost every article or a book that deals with Arabic. We do not think that this is how we approach variation and social linguistics generally in Arabic. So specifically on your question, I think, for instance, the richness of data from Arabic is a major contributing factor to sociolinguistic knowledge. Unfortunately, we haven't seen Arabic data forming an important part of the formulation of theory in sociolinguistics, but we are hoping that a different approach to studying Arabic, as well as a different approach to presenting data about Arabic. And that definitely implies not starting with diglossia. That definitely implies starting with the community. And then building up the model in order to understand and reach generalizations. And we are hoping that from now on, this situation will change, that the richness of the data from Arabic societies will start to, will help us in the formulation of generalizations and theory, really. Uri, do you have anything to add?
I have a different angle from which to answer your question, Zainab. Given everything that Enam just said about Arabic sociolinguistics being sociolinguistics, which focuses on Arabic, so we can examine what levels of analysis, for instance, are dealt with in sociolinguistics in general and in Arabic sociolinguistics. It has been, I mean, from the onset of sociolinguistics in the 1960s, the main focus was on phonological variation. And while in English and some other languages that has the field has expanded to morphological and syntactic variation and stylistic and so on and so forth. Still a lot of the, I don't want to say obsession, but I will say we're almost obsessed with sounds, and which is fine. And indeed, a lot of the diversity that we see across Arabic dialects has to do with sounds. Interestingly, by the way, while in English, phonological variation often focuses on vowels, in Arabic we often focus on consonants, and not because there is no vocalic variation. Bill Carter, who is sitting here, did some work on sociophonetics of Arabic vowels. Not many people have done that. So we can talk about that. And that's how I would try to view what we do in Arabic compared to other, compared to the practice of sociolinguistic research on other languages. And in that vein, I think, yes, we should expand. We should talk a little bit. We do talk in our book and in our kind of milieu of researchers about morphophonological variation, things like the feminine ending, the so-called ta marbuta. I mean, how you pronounce the feminine ending, is it a or e or e, and how is it conditioned by lexical constraints or phonological constraints? That definitely is a step forward, but we don't have a lot of, for instance, morphosyntactic or syntactic variation having been looked at in Arabic. So again, we want to look at the things that or we want to look at topics in sociolinguistics that are of relevance to Arabic as a natural language, right? And again, we're not talking about whether you're speaking Fusha. I mean, we're talking about how people actually speak. right? And if tomorrow we discover a community somewhere in Sudan where everybody speaks Fusha, ahla wa sahla, we'll start examining how they speak Fusha in different ways. But that's not the case well, as far as we know, in all places where Arabic is spoken. I'll say something more. We have had this little example from Central Asian Arabic. There are, Uzbekistan was the example, there are areas where Arabic is spoken with little to no input from standard Arabic. Maltese is an Arabic dialect, and the average Maltese speaker does not know Fusha, cannot read modern standard Arabic, doesn't care about modern standard Arabic. And a lot of this is true as well in sub-Saharan Africa, in some places near Lake Chad, in Central Asia, like I said. So it's just not always there as well. That's another aspect.
Yeah, can I just add, we're not saying that switching to standard Arabic or mixing with standard Arabic in particular situations isn't important or not worth looking at. Certainly it is, if that is what you're after. We are simply saying that in order to understand sociolinguistic variation and change in vernacular Arabic, that is not how you approach it. That is not what you do. Okay? So yeah. People can be interested in all sorts of things that are to do with standard Arabic. Certainly, it is a variety that is important on the media, in various other aspects of the lives of Arabic speakers. But that is not the point when we talk about variation and change in vernacular Arabic.
And by the way, there is variation.
Style, if you like, it's a style. It's a style.
Yeah, and there is variation in standard Arabic. If you look at newspaper articles from Tunisia and Saudi Arabia and Palestine and Egypt, you'll notice that it's not the same state. The differences may be more like, I don't know, Australian versus Canadian English or something like that in terms of, in terms of not just spelling, but stylistics. But again, this is another myth, right? That standard Arabic is 100% the same wherever you go. That also is not true. It's just not the focus of the kind of sociolinguistics that we have been interested in.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it actually leads me also to my other question that I was interested in as you were presenting. Do you see that there's any role for language ideology and sort of the policies that that maybe favor certain views of language over others or give prestige to certain forms of language? Do you see any role for that, or do you see any sort of social linguistic consequences to any of that? Do you think that their social linguistics can address also, or is influenced by, I should say, is influenced by the policies towards language ideology that is in a given place, an Arabic speaking place?
Yeah. I mean, ideology is very important. But if, from what I understood, you are talking about the ideology of respecting standard Arabic and calling only standard Arabic or classical Arabic as Arabic and all other varieties as debased.
Or relegating certain types of Arabics to certain functions. For example, thinking that I mean, even to speak about an example close to us here, as we teach Arabic, we often have to rethink, the functions of the different types of Arabic. Is Ammiya Arabic important for somebody who is seeking a career, an academic career in Arabic, for example? Is it important? How important is it? Is it more important than Fusha Arabic? So assigning certain functions to certain types of Arabic.
Yeah, you know what? This same ideology has been there for hundreds of years. Exactly the same idea. It hasn't changed. What the state and educational institutions feed the little kid is that this is the only Arabic and this is the nicest Arabic and all other Arabics are no good. And you know what? Arabic speakers just do not listen to that, not by not believing that this is a particularly important variety of Arabic that we must respect, because they do. All Arabs do, regardless of who they are. If you ask an average Arab or a specialist in whichever field, they will tell you that there is a certain attachment. It's a psychological attachment, as well as, part of respect for the culture. But when you actually look at what is happening in Arab societies and in schools, that is not what you find, okay? Standard Arabic is up there. People respect it and they use it when they need to. But really, the sociolinguistic stratification does not involve Arabic. If you look at the trajectory of change in Arabic, it's never in the direction of standard Arabic except by accident. And what I mean by that is that there are variants that happen to be shared between standard Arabic and a variety of Arabic that is predominant in a certain society, and you tend to find that change is usually in the direction of these supralocal features. If they happen to be identical to standard Arabic features, that is purely a coincidence, because if you look at other variables, where the trajectory of change is exactly the opposite of standard Arabic, the power and prestige of standard Arabic does not seem to change that trajectory of change. And we have very many examples of features that are variable and changing in Arabic against standard Arabic. I'll give you an example from the Levant. Interdentals. So there are varieties of Arabic that maintain interdentals, respect the phonemic status of the distinction between interdental and stop, or interdental and sibilant. In the East Mediterranean varieties, absolutely across the board, change is happening towards the merger. The interdentals are disappearing from the dialect. In the most recently studied dialect, the dialect of Amman, which I studied, this is very clear. The dialects in the input, or some of the dialects in the input, had interdental sounds, interdental phonemes, exactly the same as standard Arabic. And what is happening in Amman? These are changing towards the stop. Coinization, regional coinization brings Damascus, Beirut, Jerusalem, and Amman together. And this regional koine does not have interdentals. As simple as that.
Okay, well, thank you so much again to both of you, Dr. Enam and Dr. Uri. And I think we should now move on to the questions to give opportunity to the audience to ask their questions. And so I see some hands raised. Let's start with Muhammad Al-Ariqi. Ahlan, Muhammad, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, thank you, Zainab. And of course, thank you for our speakers. This is an interesting book. So this is Muhammad Al-Ariqi. I'm a PhD phonology at the University of Utah. I investigate Arabic variation, morphophonological variation, especially of South Arabian dialects, particularly Yemeni dialects. My question here is on the sociolinguistic variation explored in this book. Is it mainly based on lexical, structural, or morphophonological variation? And mainly, and then if any one of these, why? Second question is, have there been any attempts to investigate, let's say, by the authors, investigate some Arabic varieties which are closer to the center of Arabic, Standard Arabic, like South Arabian dialects, Yemeni Arabic, Omani Arabic, South Saudi dialects, which are close to the center of Standard Arabic, or not? Thank you.
Right, I'm not sure I understood your first question, Muhammad, but I'll answer the second one and then perhaps you can clarify what you mean. I don't know why you assume that certain varieties are closer to Standard Arabic, or what you think Standard Arabic is. In fact, if we incorporate the latest findings, analysis of the inscriptions that date back to the 2nd century BC at least, the suggestion is that the original home of Arabic is not inside the peninsula, but in the Jordanian Badia. So, I mean, I am pointing to the work of Ahmed al-Jallad, which concluded that most probably Arabic, in fact, went southwards rather than from inside the peninsula upwards. So far as we know now, it is quite possible that the ancient home of Arabic is, in fact, much farther north in around the countries that we call Jordan and Syria nowadays. So assuming that varieties inside the peninsula are more similar to the variety that we call Standard Arabic, would presume also that the variety that we call Standard Arabic or Classical Arabic was actually a dialect, one dialect of Arabic. And we have no proof of that, right? I mean, there are indications that what the grammarians codified back in the 8th century was a mixture of Arabic dialects. So there is no clear proof that there was a group of people who spoke like that. I'm not sure I understand the first part of your question, but perhaps Uri.
I think the question pertained to the what I referred to earlier as levels of analysis of variation, right? I think what you asked was whether we focus on lexical or phonological or syntactic variation. Is my understanding correctly?
Yes. Thanks.
Okay. Well, as we said, one of the kind of one of the areas where Arabic sociolinguistics somewhat lags behind general sociolinguistics is that the vast majority of what we do is still phonological variation, particularly, as I said, about having to do with consonants. That's probably because that's where we more readily detect differences between dialects. We have, I mean, just take the infamous qaf, right? We have qa, ga, ja, za, and so on and so forth. But we haven't yet really made leaps and bounds into, say, syntactic variation or pragmatic variation, right? Which is more and more the case in the study of variation in other languages. Although I must say that if you go to sociolinguistics conferences, general sociolinguistics, I think still the majority of variation that's dealt with is phonological or morphophonemic. We don't really deal that much with lexical variation because it's not really part of the structure of language in the same way that phonology, morphology, and syntax are, right? Yeah, you can talk about loan words, you can talk about code switching. Code switching is a very interesting topic in and of its own, some of which is sociolinguistic in nature and some of which is kind of formal syntax, basically. We don't have a lot of studies on code switching in Arabic. There are kind of bits and pieces here and there, mostly about code switching between Arabic and European languages amongst immigrants in the Netherlands and France and the like. But I guess the the long and short of it is that we are interested in anything that can tell us about variation in the structure of the language, right? Phonology is seminal, but morphology and syntax are also there. Enam, do you want to add to that?
Just to say that we presented whatever data there is available from Arabic, so long as it is empirical. So if that is what you were asking, Muhammad, so you will find synthesis of research over 4 decades or something like that. That includes all sorts of phonological. There is some morphophonemic and morphosyntactic, not so much lexical, but really we were confined by what data is available, what empirics.
Cool. Thank you very much. This is very interesting. I look forward to reading the book. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next question is from Stefan Dollinger. Would you, Stefan?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you.
And can I ask
thank you very much.
To be brief, so that we can have a chance to get more questions as well. Go ahead. Thank you very much.
So just want to say a couple of things. I've been following the increased output in Arabic sociolinguistics now for a while. I've had students who were looking at Egyptian, Arabic, and certain aspects, including lexis. It's clear, Yuri, that sociolinguistics, variation in sociolinguistics isn't covering everything. I wouldn't agree with your assessment that lexis is not part of the structure. I think it's been really neglected to the detriment of the field. But there are different kinds of sociolinguistics that look at this. But what I wanted to say is, by looking at non-standard usage in variations sociolinguistics, we sort of left out to think about and theorize the standard. And I think this is detrimental. I've put a link to a debate which I call the pluricentricity debate. It's clear to me that you guys are doing the right thing, trying to think of Arabic in a pluricentric sense with multiple centers, national, whatever. Standard Arabic, when I hear this, I always ask myself, what does it mean? Just like I ask myself when somebody says standard English or standard German, which kind of German? Standard Austrian German, standard German German. It's very different. Standard Canadian English, right? So it's great that you're thinking about this. And I think we must not forget something that the pre-sociolinguists said, Max Weinreich, a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. Maybe less militaristically with an institution to back it up. I think that's so important, and that there come all the attitudes into it, the cognitive, the perception, not just the behavior, and certainly not just the phonetics. But thank you very much. I'll be following you in the field further. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you. Shall we take the next question from Pune? Please unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much, Zainab. Thank you so much for this inspiring and interesting talk. I'm a psycholinguist, so not a sociolinguist, but I really enjoyed both of your talks. I will make sure to order a copy of the book. The first question I have is for Uri. The part that you said there's a connection between historical linguistics and sociolinguistics dialectology. I was wondering if different dialects of Arabic have developed differently through time. I'm interested in knowing some of those common changes, not the different ones. And if I understood correctly from your responses to the two previous questions, is that safe to say that these changes were mostly, they were like lexical and phonological rather than morphosyntactic? Or did you say that studies haven't been done on them, but they have to be done on them. So I'm a bit confused in that. And then one more question for Enam. I was wondering if there are any studies done on gender biased expressions in Arabic that she can refer me to. Thank you.
All right. So actually, one of the interesting kind of common developments among Arabic dialects is lexical. Interestingly enough, I mean, for instance, some of the very basic verbs like to go / walk and to see, right? Almost none of the contemporary vernaculars have what appears to be the classical or the old Semitic roots, ra'a, for instance, ra'aya for seeing, and dhahaba for going, walking, and I'll take the see verb, right? It's almost shaf in all dialects, almost. And the interesting thing that we didn't know before we wrote the book, but we consulted several of our colleagues, is that actually Maltese, which is quite divergent from Arabic in other senses, not divergent from Arabic, divergent from other varieties of Arabic, actually retains the old Semitic root. And we have the whole paradigm in the book in one of the sections. So that's, that may be kind of a spot where I somewhat agree with what Stefan's critique about not including lexical variation. But there is also there are many, but I'll give you just one other phonological development that has occurred pretty much throughout the entire Arabic-speaking world, which is the loss of distinction between two pharyngalized consonants, dha and dha. Okay, so we have an alveolar stop and an interdental, voiced interdental. In some dialects, they have not exactly merged. In some dialects, they are both realized as a stop, and in others as an interdental fricative. But the interesting thing is that and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that we have very, very, very few cases like Tihamat Kahtan, where there still is some distinction, but in other places, it's not that they developed in a particular phonetic direction, but phonologically, the distinction has been lost. So that there are no longer two distinct phonemes. Okay, this is a bit different from what happened to the other interdentals, the non-emphatic ones. But the interesting thing again is that the distinction no longer prevails. Enam, any other things that you might want to add?
Yeah, Pune, you asked about different varieties of Arabic changing in different directions. Is that what?
In similar directions, I think.
Right. Oh, okay. Now, what we try to do in our book is to demonstrate that such generalizations can only be made if each one of these dialects that we are generalizing about are studied separately in relation to the community in which the variety is spoken. So this is the model that we advocate. And you tend to find, so now we have a respectable number of studies, for instance, from the Peninsula Arabic, in particular Saudi Arabia, and the East Mediterranean. And we are able to make some generalizations because these communities have been studied individually first. And in fact, we try to do this in an article that we published in Language and Society to look precisely at that, some sort of global view of what is happening, for instance, to villa stops. There appears to be a reversal of historical change, the historical change of palatalization in the vicinity of front and high vowels seems to be reversing. And in fact, we conclude that it's not a reversal. It appears to be a reversal. But when you look at the details, the linguistic constraints, for instance, and the social evaluations, you conclude it's not. So, yes, there are similarities, but these similarities are not global generalizations. They are to do with the community, and they are to do with the history of the community, what is happening in that community. So I'll give you an example. I gave the example of interdentals earlier. I said that in the East Mediterranean, they change in the direction of stop or sibilant. So the interdentals are, if you like, disappearing. They're not going to disappear, but so to speak, yeah. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, what we are finding is exactly the opposite. In fact, the dialects that do not have interdentals seem to be moving in the direction of the dialects that do have the interdentals. And why is that? That is the important question. Why is that? Why do we have these opposing trajectories? And the answer, that is where the generalization is. The answer is that the dialect, the Koinized standard, the natural standard, I'm not talking about standard Arabic, so standard Saudi Arabic, if you like, contains interdentals. Standard Levantine Arabic doesn't contain interdentals. That is where the generalization lies. So I hope that answers you. And then you asked about gender bias expressions, whether there are studies. I am not familiar with any such studies. I follow the discussions on the social media because people are very interested. Everyone has something to say about that. So I follow it there, but I haven't seen studies. Maybe someone knows about specialist studies on that, but I don't.
Thank you
you very much. We have at least 2 more questions, and I just wanted to make sure that our speakers are okay if we go over time a little bit to accommodate these questions. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have Khaled Al-Harbi here and Hala Abdul Mubdi in the chat. So let's start with the question with Khaled. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much for the talk. This is Khaled Al-Harbi, a PhD student at Georgetown University. This was a very interesting talk, and I do look forward to ordering my copy and reading the book in the near future, inshallah. You touch on really important social categories where I think insights from Arabic dialects have been quite overlooked in the variationist literature. But I wonder, though, where the concept of tribe fits, particularly as it is manifested in the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, among others. I'm aware of dialectological work in which tribe heavily figures in the region, and it also affects variation in quite important ways. I wonder if it has been discussed at all in the book, and whether a fine-grained accounts of variation in the Arab world would need to be inclusive of issues related to tribal affiliation. So that's my question.
Thank you so much, Khaled. This is a very important question. And of course, it is important we deal with that. I mean, tribal, stratification along the lines of tribal affiliation is simply one example of social stratification. Yeah, we tend to find it in areas where the social structure, and here is why it is important to look locally, as Penny always reminds us. So in societies that are structured along these lines, absolutely, which tribe you are affiliated with, which tribe you hail from is very important, absolutely. And the communities that you mentioned would be an example. So if you read some of our some of our students' recent thesis, you will see that the tribe is important. So, for instance, there is a study from Medina. I think Abir was here. She's the one who studied that. She talks about the community of Medina, firstly, as urban versus tribal. So she looked at the urban community separately from the tribal community, and in particular she looked at Harb, which is your tribe, I presume. And at the same time as Abir Hussein was studying Medina, we had another colleague, Muhammad Al-Ruhail, who was focusing on Harb in particular. So Abir did the two communities as representative of the whole society of Medina, and Muhammad looked at Harb in particular. So absolutely, yes, and there are various other studies. So in sum, if the society is stratified in that way, definitely this will be a social factor.
Yeah, and to add something to this, I mean, a lot of sociolinguistics has been focused on urban communities, right? We have a lot about New York and Detroit and London and Paris and so on, and Cairo. But it's true that Arabic data actually allows us to look at these non-urban, I don't even know what to call it. They're not urban, they're not rural, they're not really nomadic anymore. It's a different kind of social structure. Enam also talks about egalitarian tribal systems versus non-egalitarian tribal systems. So all of this really opens a window into a different kind of social structure in which language lives, different from most of what has been studied thus far, but tribal structures are not unique to Arabic speakers, right? And it may be the case that if we establish a more, I don't know, a richer corpus of data of research on such communities, that it might open yet another window to looking at things elsewhere, where not just Arabic is spoken, not necessarily nomads in the desert and all these kinds of orientalistic stereotypes. There are groups like this, there are societies like this elsewhere. Here, Abir has joined us again. So, yeah. Abir, do you want to say something? Did you hear the question? It was about tribal societies, and maybe your work. Can shed light on this.
Yes, I heard the question, but I had to move the room because my son is watching a football match. That's why.
Okay.
Yes, I heard, and I heard Dr. Enam's answer at perfectly clear to me. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yes, so a tribal affiliation and urban community as a social factor. Yes.
Yeah, and they're not contradictory, right? Because you have big cities in Saudi Arabia where some of the population is, are veteran urbanites, right, for generations, and others are relative newcomers.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Did you want to add something, Dr.
I just wanted to mention to Khalid that there are several studies on Saudi Arabia in particular that deal with tribal affiliation, and in fact, I have one of my PhD students is there. She is studying Al-Garni, for instance, who have moved to the city, and various other students are doing the same. So yes, tribal affiliation is absolutely important in this particular context.
Thank you. So our last question is from Hela Abdelmunam. It's via the chat. Would you like to ask it yourself, Hela? Would you like to unmute yourself, or would you like me to ask it for you? I don't know if you can hear. I can go ahead and read your question then. Okay. So Hannah says, nice talk. Thank you very much. My question is, how does the sociolinguistic field approach or explain the phenomenon of code switching between Arabic vernacular and English among young generations? And how do you foresee its impact on Arabic?
Okay, I'll give a brief introduction and maybe Enam can comment a little further. In our chapter on education, as Enam briefly explained earlier, we talk about the role that foreign languages may have in the various education systems, right? So we talk about Jordan, for instance, where there is a new type of private schooling, namely international schools, British schools, American schools, and so forth, where English is the, or at least a language of instruction. We talk a little bit about Morocco, where English, in some cases, even some institutions of higher education, like Al-Wer University, is taking over from French as the kind of international-ish language. So we don't focus in the book that much on code switching, partly because there aren't that many studies on it, and it's also not really our field of expertise. But I think that the key to some of these questions does lie in these new emerging types of both primary and secondary education, but also higher education, where English in some places, French in others, like I said, English where French used to be, and so forth, are becoming part and parcel of the repertoire, the linguistic repertoire of speakers, especially young speakers. Yes, especially young speakers who use the internet and watch YouTube and satellite TV and all that.
I will add, sorry, I forgot the name of
Hala.
Hala or Hala?
Sorry, my voice can hardly get out. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So Hala, I think there are 2 points here really when we think about this new trend. Yeah, it's increased. It's always been there, kind of. I mean, we saw it with French in North Africa, and increasingly in the eastern part of the Arab world, English is having clearly more presence in everyday discourse, right? Now, there are, I think, 2 points to think about. There is the effect on the dialect, and that effect, I would say, is confined to the group who are involved in this, to the group who we may call bilingual, yeah? Because not everyone who uses English is bilingual in the strict definition of bilingual. So I would say that the effect really would be on the idiolect, or on the Arabic idiolect of these individuals who do this systematically. Now, who knows whether their effect is going to broaden and actually disseminate to other social groups. And here is the second point that I wanted to mention, which I think should precede any study of the effect of using English on this particular variety. And that is the social configuration. So what you notice, especially with these international schools, is that they're creating a special class in society, right?
Yes.
Which is almost an isolate. These kids, and I'm not talking about private education in general, I'm talking about this type of education, yeah? Because in this type of education, the children are taught through the medium of English, whereas in the traditional private schooling, the children are taught through the medium of Arabic, yeah? And then, but they speak English better. than kids who are in state schools. But in this new, it's a completely new philosophy of education. These kids are taught through English, and they're trained and prepared to go to universities abroad, English-speaking universities. This has created, over the past 2 decades or so, that's when these schools became very famous, a testimony really to the failure of state education. This is how I see it. But they created a new class in society. And if you investigate, as I have, as part of my investigation of the emergence of the Amman dialect, these kids actually socialize together, very rarely outside their social group. They go to the same, they go to particular exclusive clubs, they go on holidays together, and so on and so forth. I think we need to firstly understand this development, and then certainly look at how this very close contact between Arabic and English, how it is affecting their dialect. We start there, how it is affecting their dialect, before we jump to conclusions about how it is affecting that variety of Arabic. But I think it should be absolutely an important part of sociolinguistic study.
Yeah, I think they are not just the kids in international schools that you do that. I mean, over here in Egypt, what I've noticed is that they tend to shift into English or insert sentences, phrases, words in their spoken to mark their belongingness to the bourgeois class.
Yeah.
So, and the phenomenon is actually kind of spreading to a lower to a lower class than bourgeois, like to the average middle class, because this is also is kind of like trying to jump to the bourgeois. So are we expecting like years from now that we are going to witness bubbles communities in the Arab world?
Well, I wouldn't really predict that without caution, at least. Yeah. I mean, this is an area that needs investigation. But you see, there are different layers, categories of users of this strategy, of this style, if you like. Yeah, there is the legitimate category of bilinguals who actually have full control over this particular strategy of interaction. But there are those who emulate that, the wannabes, perhaps. Yeah. So I think these issues need careful investigation.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Let's take our last question. This will be really the last one, since we've been going overboard for some time now, and it's from Hassan. Hassan, please go ahead and ask your question, and please be brief.
Oh, right. Thank you so much, Zainab. I didn't quite expect that you would give me the floor. I would like to thank you, Uri and Enam. Enam read almost all of your articles when I did my master's a while ago. I think you're an inspiration. Anyway, I just wanted to ask you, Enam, I think in one of your articles, you stated that religion could serve as kind of like a proxy factor for language variation. So could you please kind of like elaborate on that? Because I'm kind of like interested to do some sort of comparative study on that particular thing in the near future. So I would really appreciate it if you could just please give me like, some advice or something.
Right. I'm assuming that you are referring to our article in Zeitschrift für Arabische Linguistik, right? The emergence of religion as a social factor or something like that in Jordan, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay, I think this is a very important observation, we based it really on several hours and several years of working with these communities, and I'm talking about almost 30 years between us, Bruno and I in particular. And I mean, and this is okay, I'm trying to find a way to summarize really. One important point I think to mention is that it wasn't possible, even though I looked at whether religion is a significant factor back in 1987, and I concluded it wasn't in Jordan. And later on in 2015, where I changed my mind. And the reason I changed my mind is that we had a lot more data. Number one, more data. Number two, things happened in the meantime. And number three, we analyzed the data from different perspectives. In the meantime, we wrote a grammar of the dialect. So combining different ways of data analysis allowed us to see that there were very subtle differences between Christians and Muslims in particular places in Jordan. So I would say, if you are looking for advice as to how to analyze, how to spot these differences, I would say you need, if it's the same situation as Jordan, where religion was never really an important criterion, but has become that way because of what's been happening in the region over the past 3-4 decades, then I would say you need sufficient amount of data and multiple layers of analysis.
Right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So thank you very much. This really brings us to the end. Thank you, Dr. Enam. Thank you, Dr. Uri, for a very interesting and informative presentation. And thank you all for your attendance and for your interest. And you should have all received an email from Thomas McGuire about for those interested in buying the book, which is probably all of us, there is a discount code, and Tom has sent it to us during the course of the presentation. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your day, or enjoy the rest of your evening, wherever you are.
Night. It's almost night. It's almost bedtime.
And thank you, Zainab, for hosting this meeting and for your questions and for your ability to run over time and master the So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.